Welcome back to Mark My Words Football Podcast with Rob.
That's Scott.
And here we are with a special divisional round, conference championship round edition of the podcast. We just got done with a wild and exciting divisional round of football in which we saw some crazy games, a huge, massive upset, which we will get to, and a very, very awesome classic between two of the league's best QBs on Sunday night. But before we get into those games, we'll start it off with the Saturday afternoon game that had the Texans fall to the Kansas City Chiefs by a score of 14-23. And Scott, what were your thoughts from this one?
Seemed like the Texans certainly let this one slip away. I'm sure many of you saw this one out there, that the Texans were now the first team in history to outgain their opponent by over 100 yards, not turn the ball over, and lose a playoff game. The previous teams were 49-0. Because, you talk about a lot of these other teams, because we went to the fact that this weekend, all of the teams that had more yards gained lost. But in the case of all the others, they lost a turnover battle. Turnovers played a big part into it. Houston was the only one that it didn't. They did not commit a single turnover. But there were other ways that Houston did get in their own way in this game, definitely.
Yeah, namely the penalties, having 50 more penalty yards than the Chiefs in this one. And but for me, this was the special teams, just a clinic. And that was a huge disparity in this one between the Chiefs and the Texans.
Absolutely.
The Texans in this one just absolutely, right from the beginning, just discombobulated on the special teams unit, allowing like a 60-yard opening kickoff return. And then you saw Benito go over to the sideline and just shove his coach. Like, yeah, that's a great look to start off the most important game of your season against the best team in the league. Like, great job. And then they go on to miss a field goal, miss an extra point, and then have a field goal blocked. Like, that's just awful, awful special teams. Sometimes we forget about the third team on the field, and we have to realize how important they can actually be. That takes me back to the 2010 Chargers, where the Chargers had the number one offense in the league by yardage, number one defense in the league by yardage, and yet they missed the playoffs because they had the worst special teams possibly ever. And so that's one phase of the game that is often overlooked, but in the playoffs it can really, really come back to bite you. And for me, that was what really stood out in this one.
Yeah, definitely. Like for Kansas City, it was 100% special teams and defense. See, when you look at their offense, only 2.2 yards per carry on the ground and 177 yards through the air. Like Patrick Mahomes is not particularly impressive. He kind of did what he had to do. He didn't commit any turnovers, but Xavier Worthy was the only receiver who caught a pass this game. Like, that's not a particularly sustainable model. And especially when you can't get anything going on the ground, only 50 yards total. Yeah, like the 2.2 yards per carry, that's definitely concerning for them. So I'd be interested to see if they can pick some things up on that offense or not.
It is interesting that, like you said, it's kind of in the same thread of the teams that won. They all were outgained by their opponents that lost. And also kind of the quarterbacks, too, where they were outplayed, you could say, by their opposing QBs. Like Mahomes didn't break 200 yards, and Josh Allen didn't break 200 yards, and Jalen Hurts didn't break 200 yards as well. So the only quarterback that you could say definitely by the stats outplayed the other was Daniels outplaying Goff. So there's something to be said about that, though. And I think that it really comes down to not more so making the right decisions at the right times in the playoffs. And this is something that frustrates people a lot of the time because they felt like their team went out there and did it. But it's also not that surprising. Like you look at throughout the ages of all the quarterbacks that we thought and all the teams that we think are just so good and they're so awesome, and yet they fall and we're all perplexed by it. You look at like the Packers when they're 15-1, coming off a year in which they won the Super Bowl. Rodgers won the MVP. He was awesome that year, and they lose their first playoff game. And Rodgers has never played well in his playoff career, yet some people say he's the best regular season QB ever. Peyton Manning, 5-time MVP, amazing regular season QB, can never get it done in the playoffs. He won 2 Super Bowls, but those runs weren't that impressive from his play. It just goes to show you that the playoffs are a different animal. They're a completely different animal. This is why people say defense wins championships, because in the playoffs, the margin of error is so small, and penalties and special teams and defensive errors can really do you in the playoffs more than in the regular season.
Yeah. And this year seems to be like running the ball has become even more important. I think there had been several years, like over the past few, where it seemed like running backs and running the ball was just, it didn't matter who you put out there. It just seemed like it didn't matter very much. It seemed like the biggest part of the winning a game was always the passing offense. But it seems like the running game has become so much more important this year.
Yeah, 100%. This has been the year of the running back revival. I mean, we've seen Derrick Henry just kill it. Saquon Barkley, obviously a historic season. Josh Jacobs with the Packers having a great season. And all the receivers, it's like, well, the Bills, they got rid of Stephon Diggs. They look better than ever. The Chiefs, a few years ago, got rid of Tyreek Hill. They won 2 Super Bowls since then. The Eagles, not throwing to A.J. Brown, turns out they can still win. So it's kind of been sort of an indictment year on the receivers, whereas the running backs have definitely seen a surge, which is interesting to see how teams are going to approach roster construction after this season. I wonder if that will change at all. But in this one, yeah, even the running game though wasn't amazing for the Chiefs, like you said. But to me, it was just situations. Like Stroud took some bad sacks, lost some good yardage on those sacks.
Yeah, like that's what comes down to for me. It was like Kansas City came up with the big sacks. They sacked Stroud 8 times, and almost all of them were on the last couple drives when they needed to do something. Like exactly. Stroud had and the team had done a pretty good job overcoming the penalties throughout most of the game, and there were down situations. But right at the end, Spagnuolo was able to dial up some really timely blitzes and really put Stroud under duress for the majority of those last few drives, and it just looked like nothing was happening for that team.
100%. But I think the one, I think the Chiefs, they did a lot of good things in this one. But offensively, the one really key point that you're really excited about was seeing Kelsey, kind of revive himself. This year, he had, his worst season statistically, not breaking 1,000 yards, only having 4 touchdowns. And in this one, he goes for 117 and a really nice touchdown. I mean, that's got to be something that excites you to be like, okay, he's back. Let's see that magic again rekindled going forward in the conference championship.
Yeah.
And from there, we're going on to the Saturday night game. Man, oh man, what an upset this was. The Washington Commanders take down the Lions, the powerhouses all season, by a score of 45-31. Crushing loss for Detroit. What were your takeaways from this one?
For me, the diagnosis on this game is pretty simple. Turnovers did you in. 5 turnovers for Detroit, 21 points for Commanders off those turnovers. That's more than the game. Turnovers were absolutely what did you in. But kudos to Washington for really taking advantage of that. And their offense is really able to stay solid both through the air and on the ground all day long in that one. Although Detroit did have more yards total, I think a lot of it did kind of come in that more garbage time when the Commanders pretty much already had the game in hand, and it was like, everything had to go perfect, so they were just chucking it down the field. So if not for that, for the amount of times Detroit had possession when the game was out of hand, I think the yards could have even been closer.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, focusing on the losing side with Detroit before I get to the Commanders, which I was super impressed with them, but yeah, the 5 turnovers, that's just backbreaking. I mean, no team, I would venture to say, could ever overcome that in the playoffs. The Lions overcame it in the regular season, in the regular season when Goff threw those 5 picks and they still were able to beat Houston. But if you mess around like that in the playoffs, it's just not going to happen. And it's just kind of a frustrating thing in the NFL because it's so quarterback dependent. And I don't want to kill Goff because I thought he had a really good season, but it goes to show you that what I've thought about him is that he doesn't have that ability to elevate the team around him. I mean, he could be really, really good and look excellent when he has a great team, a great run game. But when it comes time for him to have to take the team on his shoulders, a lot of times it just doesn't work out. I mean, that's why McVay and the Rams traded him off for Stafford and then went and won a Super Bowl after that. Is because they saw, we just need that little bit to take us over the edge. And I really like Jared Goff. I really think he's a great quarterback. But unfortunately, I just don't think he has that superhero in him like the top QBs do. Like Jaden Daniels, I think, does. And focusing on the Commanders, man, Jaden Daniels has just been incredible. This has been, I think, the best rookie season I've seen from a quarterback. taking your team to the conference championship and doing it when your defense stinks. I mean, the Commanders' defense is not good, giving up, like 31 points, even in a game in which they forced 5 turnovers. So Jaden Daniels, just kudos to him. What an amazing season he's had.
Yeah. I mean, not often that your defense is going to allow over 200 rushing yards and over 300 passing yards and still win, and handily too. Of course, a lot of that is turnover dependent, but kudos to Washington for being able to take that game.
Yeah, and the coaching staff too with Dan Quinn. I mean, that is just, and Cliff Kingsbury, just huge props to them. They're the most aggressive team on fourth down this season. I mean, they outlioned the Lions this season. They had an 80% rate for the season on fourth down. It's just unbelievable, just gutsy all season long. They went into every single game saying, we don't care. We're going to go and play our game. We're going to play free. And, man, it's led them to just an amazing season. Hopefully they don't get too tight in the next one against Philly. But this team is so lethal because they're just so free. They don't care. They're like, and we've seen to say this about a lot of teams. Like we said it about the Packers last season, and this season, the Texans. We said, they're playing with house money. That really does add something to your game plan when you know that like we are playing with house money. Like we don't have anything to lose in this one, and so we can just go out and do the things that we want to do without fear of repercussions. As Commanders, it's certainly paid off.
Yeah, absolutely. And going back to your fourth down point, any guess to who the 4 teams are that have the best conversion percentage on fourth downs this year?
It's got to be Commanders, probably Lions, Eagles with that tush push. Yeah, probably those 3 at least.
It is the 4 remaining teams in the conference championship: Commanders, Eagles, Bills, and Chiefs.
Really?
Yep.
That's crazy. Yeah, that's been a really interesting development in the NFL too. As the analytics get more and more robust, a lot of teams going for it on fourth down. And you definitely see, like, if you're able to convert that, that's crazy. But with the Commanders, it's even more crazy because with the Bills and the Eagles, a lot of their fourth downs are like 4th and 1, 4th and 2. We're going to tush push it with our awesome offensive line, or we're going to run it with the most physical quarterback in the history of the NFL. With the Commanders, it's like we got Jaden Daniels, skinny frame. It's like, but they still do it. So that's unbelievable. Yeah, just amazing. That's crazy.
And I think, and for Detroit, that is a team that I feel like truly sad to see eliminated. I mean, Dan Campbell mentioned it last year. It's really hard to get back to that conference championship, to get back to the Super Bowl. It's really hard to get back to that spot, and saying he didn't want to take it for granted, and that everyone seemed like it was a sure thing that they'd get back there with as great a season that they had, and sure enough, you see them fall short.
Yeah, it is crushing. And now that they lost both their coordinators, I know I asked you last week if you said their Super Bowl window maybe it temporarily closes. You said no. And I don't know. It gives me pause. I think you could definitely be encouraged by the Eagles. You can look at them as an example when they lost both of their coordinators, and now they're back, right in the mix of things. So you just got to lean on the guys, that you still have. Dan Campbell I think, is an exceptional coach. And so who's to say they won't be back here next year? But I think it's going to get a lot tougher for them. I think if you look at this season, this is as good as a chance that you're going to have. You had the 1 seed. You had no real juggernaut. And still in the NFC, you don't really have an elite quarterback. I mean, probably the best one you might say is Stafford. I mean, some people might now say Daniels, but Love maybe is kind of up there. I mean, you didn't really have that. You don't have the gauntlet that you do in the AFC. That could be changing in the next couple seasons. So this is really hurts for the Lions because it really felt like this was their conference to lose. And sure enough, they did lose it.
Absolutely.
And from there, going on to the Sunday games. And this one, we had a matchup between the Los Angeles Rams and the Philadelphia Eagles, in which the Eagles took the win 28-22. What were your takeaways from this very exciting one?
This was a little bit of an interesting one for me to diagnose. I mean, it's definitely an interesting game because of the weather and because of how that affected it with the turnovers. And you're seeing the Eagles, they got 6 points off turnovers, and the game was a 6-point margin. It seemed like that was what did it. And for the Rams, it almost seemed like the Stafford just had a really hard time getting through his receivers. I mean, they mentioned it several times in the broadcast. Like, it seems like Puka is that team. He had 14 targets this game, but only 6 receptions.
Yeah, I mean, this was a tough ask. You're asking a West Coast team who's going through a lot right now with their living situations in LA, going all the way to Philly in the snow. It was a tough ask, but I thought they were up to the task, I thought. But the Eagles obviously just killed them on really 4 just massive plays. So on the Hurts 44-yard touchdown run, the Saquon 62-yard touchdown run, then Goddard had a 35-yard reception, and that Saquon to really seal the deal, 80-yard reception or 80-yard touchdown run. Those 4 plays combined were accounted for 250 out of the 350 total yards they had. And so the Rams, I felt like the majority of the game, they played pretty good on defense. They were doing enough on offense to keep themselves in it. But those just back-breaking plays, like, man, that's really for me what did it. And then, of course, the 2 drives towards the end of the game, back-to-back fumbles, just you can't, like we say, it comes down to protecting the ball, and you just can't do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Stafford, very good point. You look at the stat sheet, he had 300 yards, 2 touchdowns, no picks. So you think, man, he played really good. And I think he did play good, especially towards the end with those last couple drives were exceptional drives. Although you could say maybe the Eagles were playing soft defense. They shouldn't have been playing soft defense because this was still a game. Despite all that happened in this game, the Rams, they literally could have won this game. They were 3rd and 2 with a minute left, down 6 on the Philadelphia 11. I mean, if you get a first down and don't get the touchdown, you can wind that clock. You have a new fresh set of downs, and you could score, and with the extra point, take the lead. And then Jalen Carter, though, had 2 sacks in this game. Both were huge. Comes in on 3rd and 2 and sacks Stafford, loss of 10. That's just, that was the dagger that did it. Now the Rams have no time. They're scrambling up. So huge clutch plays by the Eagles in this one. But I still, like, despite the fact that the Eagles are in the conference championship, I don't know how much I trust them. I mean, they looked like they wanted to give the game away against the Packers, and it looked like they were about to give the game away to the Rams. So I don't know how much they can really play around with this sort of thing. I'm still not convinced and not very confident in the Eagles.
Yeah, that game should have been over. They were up 13 with 4 minutes to go. Like, a lot of things had to go right for the Rams. I mean, they hadn't scored in the second half other than that safety and a field goal very early in the second half.
Exactly.
Yeah, so like things were just not looking good for that offense. But also about Sirianni, something I'd like to touch on. I don't know if you would agree or you noticed what happened, but at the end of that first half there, when the Eagles had the ball and they were in field goal range, Sirianni let the clock wind. He could have took a timeout, called an extra pass play, and then kicked a field goal, but he let the clock wind all the way down, and then they threw the incompletion, and it was halftime. Yeah. I was yelling at him, like, are you kidding me? Like, that was absolutely crazy to me. Like,
that was
why you couldn't have taken the extra play. You had the timeouts. Like, there was just absolutely no reason to do that. And I would have absolutely crucified him if they'd lost the game by like 1, 2, 3 points because of that.
Oh, 100%. Sirianni worries me to death. Like, if you're an Eagles fan, your biggest 2 worries are the 2 most important things, the coach and the quarterback. Hurts took some terrible sacks in this game. We talk about that with the Texans, but the Eagles they've lost over 60 yards in this game to sacks. That's just an insane amount, and so many opportunities like that. And at the end of the game, like you brought up the end of the half with Sirianni being that way, that was, I agree with you, terrible mid-clock management. But then when the Rams scored that touchdown, all you need is to get a couple first downs. It's 2nd and 7. You do a quarterback bootleg with Jalen Hurts, who hasn't played well this game, who's obviously injured, and you take a 10-plus yard sack. Like, what on earth is that call? It looked like they were going to try to lose this game.
Yeah, and like also, it was not too long after the injury when they took the safety, like putting it in Hurts' hands. Like, he was very obviously immobile at that point. I feel like he got a little bit better as the drives went along. But in that one in particular, like, you could tell he couldn't move. And when he took that safety, he would usually be able to run away from that, but he just stood in there and took it.
Yep.
Like, it just seemed like a bad decision to make your quarterback stand in the pocket like that in that situation.
Yes. So it's kind of baffling. Like, I don't know. Like, I don't think highly of Sirianni as a coach. And Hurts, I think, is not. I think of the four quarterbacks, there's a good argument to be made that he's the worst of the four. So it's kind of like a miracle that they're even in this spot, considering those two things. And this is kind of why I think we weren't really fully on board with the Eagles this year. It took a big portion of the season for us to finally recognize them as being really good.
And then they reverted. Like, they've reverted since.
Yes, exactly. And now all those doubts are climbing back up.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough to see the Rams go down this way because I thought they had it. They had it in the bag, especially that last couple plays. But wow, yeah, the Eagles going forward, they're going to have to fix those mistakes because this Washington team, I tell you, they are hungry. They're playing free, and you do that against them, they're definitely going to take advantage of it.
Mm-hmm.
And from there, going on to the final game of the week, man, this one, everything was cracked up to be Bills take the win by 2 points, winning 27-25. And Scott, what were your takeaways from this instant classic?
I thought what a good job by the Bills defense. They showed some things that they've never done before or very rarely done before. They did a really good job of containing Henry. I think this game really came down to what they did in the first half. In the first half, they limited Henry to 21 yards rushing, rushed for 87 yards themselves, and went 3 of 3 in the red zone. The Bills almost did a good job of trying to choke away the game in the second half by, I think, taking the ball out of Allen's hands a little too much, or not letting him take some of the throws that you're accustomed to seeing from Allen. But they done so well in the first half. They set themselves off good enough to have a weaker second half and still take the game.
Yeah, absolutely, like 100% there. And Henry, I'm glad that the Ravens had a really nice second half. I'm glad they didn't go away completely from the running game because then it kind of just would have been a repeat from last season. They were able to get some offense going in the second half and rally. And I absolutely agree. I think the Bills played a little too safe. But I've been really impressed with this Bills team, and especially with Josh Allen. I mean, it is so hard because you can tell he wants to rip it. He wants to just go berserk, and you know that he can do that. But he's disciplined himself so well this season, and he's played every situation to me pretty much perfectly. And he's been just a great leader for this team. And a game where he only throws 127 and they're still able to win, that speaks volumes about how far this Bills team has gone. Like if you would have told me that last year, 2 years ago, you say, oh, Josh Allen always throws for 127 against the Ravens. Do they win? We'd all be saying, no. In fact, it's probably going to be a blowout. Like, what did they score, 10 points? No, but they ended up doing really well. And, yeah, this Bills team, very disciplined. They took advantage of Baltimore's turnovers, Baltimore's drops. Lamar didn't have a great first half, came back in the second, but wasn't enough. And the Bills just playing smart, situational football really impressed me in this one.
Yeah, like they did a good job containing Henry. They did not let him get free. There was really one really long run where I thought he was about to be gone before the safeties tripped him up. But the defense, they were blitzing Lamar all the time. They were constantly in his face, and they got the fruits of that a couple of times, like obviously with the fumble recovery, and there were some rushed throws in there. I think that's exactly what they needed to do, that team. You would have liked to see them get home a little bit more, but overall I think they did a pretty good job. Matt Milano played incredible spying Lamar Jackson, and I think Ed Oliver played a very good game as well in the run game.
Yes, Matt Milano is just a huge difference maker for this Bills team. It's really nice to see that they got him back for the end of the season, and he's fresh now. I mean, you never like your players to get hurt, but it's kind of the benefit of him coming back this late is that he's completely fresh and he's reared to go. He's one of the best players in the league, and you could really feel his impact on this game for sure. And the Bills, man, they look this year. I think this is one of the best Bills teams that we've seen, maybe the best, and since Allen's been there. Just as a total team, the way they come together, the way they play as a team, it really looks like they don't have much of a weakness in this. And it's going to be interesting to see how they match up against the Chiefs, the team they beat in the regular season. But on the Ravens side of it, man, it's tough. I don't know where you go from here. I mean, it looked last season like you were the best team in the league, clearly, and you choked it away at home in the NFC Championship or AFC Championship. This year, you improve, ostensibly by getting Derrick Henry, one of the best running backs. And yeah, here we are, losing once again. It's been really frustrating. It kind of goes back to what I said about quarterbacks that play great in the regular season, but for whatever reason get tight in the playoffs. And that looks like, unfortunately, that's who Lamar is. He's about to win his third MVP and has only 3 playoff wins. So unfortunately, I don't know where you go from here if you're the Baltimore Ravens.
And for this matchup, the Bills and the Ravens are the teams with the 2 most wins in a 7-season span without ever reaching a Super Bowl. Bills with 83, Ravens with 81. And Ravens obviously will not be reaching a Super Bowl this year. Bills have an opportunity. But yeah, those are 2 teams that 2 most ever in a 7-season span. And of course, right below them would be the 1999 to 05 Colts and the 2004 to 2010 Chargers.
Wow. Yeah. It's unfortunate. You like to see Lamar, get over that hump. And he didn't have a bad game. I don't think he had a bad game at all in the second half. But those turnovers in the first half, it really kind of did him in.
He was efficient. 18 to 25, that's efficient at 250 yards. He scrambled when he needed to. It was the turnovers. That was all that was. And then just a couple of bad drops. But I think you saw a progression, though. I think because a lot of before this, he would just have terrible playoff games. I don't think he played terribly in this game. I don't think he played terribly in last game. And even last season, in the playoff games that he was in, I don't think he played terribly in those either. So maybe you could see, okay, he's been steadily getting better and better as the playoffs come around. And maybe you think that's reason to believe. The more playoff experience he gets, the better he'll be. But yeah, I mean, Josh Allen, he's one of the few players that he consistently plays well in the playoffs, performs well. And it showed again in this one, doing enough for his team to win despite not putting up the big stat line. Yeah, this is certainly the lowest stat line Allen's ever put out in the postseason. Usually averaging over 300 yards total and multiple touchdowns. I mean, he did have the 2 rushing touchdowns, none through the air this one, and of course the 127 passing yards was very low for him, but they were able to get it done.
Yeah, absolutely. And from there, as we conclude the divisional round recap, we will end it with Scott's Clown of the Week for the divisional round.
Everybody loves a good clown, and now it's time to meet the NFL's Clown of the Week for this week.
And this week, the Clown of the Week in the NFL is Baltimore Ravens tight end Mark Andrews. I think there's going to be a lot of blame when you look back on this season that Lamar Jackson's going to be blamed for what's going on and the failures of that team generally. But I think he's not to blame for this game. I think when you really look down at it, what decided this game was the errors by tight end Mark Andrews. He had an awful drop earlier in the game, and of course, he drops the 2-point conversion that would have tied the game. And who knows what would have happened afterwards? The Bills did have a minute and a half and 2 timeouts to go down and try and score the field goal that could have iced it without the Ravens getting the ball back. But it certainly gave him a good position to go into overtime, and that ended it without Andrew being able to take in an easy pass to walk in for the 2-point conversion. And they talk about the fumble as well, when holding onto the ball is just absolutely huge in this game, and he gets it punched up by Bernard and loses the turnover. When you talk about those 2 things as well as the one other drop, that's the game for you. That's definitely clownworthy. When you look at Andrew's playoff career, 8 playoff games, he's never scored a touchdown, and he has 15 drops and 1 fumble. That's just absolutely clown-worthy stuff. He's been a great tight end historically, but in the playoffs has not showed up. And for helping this team lose this week, I think being the absolute biggest reason why they lost, Mark Andrews, you were the Clown of the Week.
All right, and from there, we're going to go on to preview of the NFL Conference Championship weekend, in which both the games will be played on Sunday. The earlier game will be the NFC matchup between the Washington Commanders and the Philadelphia Eagles. This is the 3rd time these teams have met this season, and they split the season series. Who do you think wins the season series and thus advances to the Super Bowl in this one?
I'm going to have the Eagles winning this one.
I'm going to take the Commanders.
All right. So we're going to pose right off the start here.
Yeah. Yes, we are.
Both these teams, they did play close games. And this could definitely be a fun one in this. I was a little surprised at the spread in this being 6.5. I figured it would be a lot closer.
Yeah, this was preposterous to me. The first game they played was pretty close. It was an 8-point difference, but that was, pretty early in the season. And then the Commanders taking the win the second game. And that was also kind of a weird game because Jalen Hurts got, injured, and then Kenny Pickett came in and he got banged up. So a little bit odd, but like I said, the Eagles have not really inspired much confidence at all. They've tried to lose a lot of the games. And I think at this point, I trust the quarterback of the Commanders more. I trust the rookie, Jaden Daniels, over Jalen Hurts. I mean, Jalen Hurts didn't even throw over 3,000 yards this season. 3,000. He threw for 2,900 yards this season. He threw for 18 touchdowns. I mean, what is that? That is, give me a break. Jaden Daniels has been the epitome of clutch. He has been the epitome of not only not losing his team games, but winning his team games. And to me, that's going to be the difference in this one. When it comes crunch time and the team you're going to need your quarterback to step up, I think I trust Jaden to do that more.
Yeah, that's true. I might be a little bit worried about their offense, especially facing the Eagles, because I think back to the wild card weekend, that there was a time where it looked like the Commanders were not going to get into the end zone. They had lots of tries and didn't do it, and finally ended up getting it. I think was probably the 6th or 7th try after they'd ended up getting stopped on the goal line and then getting the ball back off a Mayfield fumble, and then last week getting all the points off of turnovers. So I'm a little bit worried about that offense. But for the Eagles, you're seeing like in these matchups so far this year, Barkley rushed for 296 yards and 4 touchdowns in the 2 games. So I think he's been a big presence. I think he's going to continue to do so. The Eagles are going to definitely lean heavy on him to be able to get the job done. But being able to see some more out of that passing offense would be huge for the Eagles. It's something they certainly have not had. And Hurts is being a little banged up. So it'll be interesting to see if he'll be looking 100% or if you might be able to see a little bit signs of the injury that we saw last week.
Yes, and I definitely think the Eagles are the better team. They have the better offensive line. They have the better defense. They have the better receiving core. They have the better run game. And they have the home field advantage. Like, they're the better team. But to me, the Commanders have been the worst team in both the playoff matchups so far. And they prevailed in spite of that. There's something about this team that they just have that aura, that confidence. And they remind me a lot of that 2010 Packers team that ended up going to win the Super Bowl. And they just have that chip on their shoulder. Like Jaden Daniels' first year in the league, and that was Rodgers' 3rd year as a starter. Just shocking people and just doing what you needed to do to win. Something about that is reminiscent to me of that. And this, like I said, though, it's really just about, to me, the Eagles are so susceptible. And like, if they can't get Saquon going, like, I don't see Jalen Hurts being able to do anything. And maybe you could say, well, no team has been able to stop Saquon this year. And I would say, fair point. But if the Commanders can at least slow him down a little bit and try and put the game into Jalen Hurts' hands, I think they do have a good shot to win.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that. I would not have a lot of confidence in Hurts to be able to win the game. I think it's really going to be about the Eagles' defense, like them wrecking havoc with the defensive line, like being able to try and get the turnovers that they had this year, because the Eagles' defense has been very, very good the second half of the season. That's going to be the biggest thing for them. And then, of course, running the ball. And those are the 2 things that historically I've been like, you don't want to count on those things. And yeah, this week, that's what I'm counting on for Eagles win. So I'd say I'm not feeling super confident in this one, but my gut is telling me the Eagles in this game.
Yeah, that's a really weird. Yeah, because this is like, the Eagles are like the antithesis of like everything you typically like to see in a playoff team, and you would just haven't been big on the Eagles this season. So I'm actually a little bit surprised to see that.
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to like the 3rd episode of the Quarterly Tiers where I refused to put them in the heavyweights just because I didn't feel like it. That was my complete analysis of I said, sue me. Like, I just don't like them. That's why.
I said that's as good a reason as any. I completely understand. Oh my goodness. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised though if they won this one, because I do think they're the better team. But and I think the way that they lose, I think the way that the Commanders win is by the Eagles losing it. So, but I do think that there's a very good chance that happens.
Yes.
And going on to the AFC Championship, we have the Buffalo Bills taking on the Kansas City Chiefs. And you might say, well, we've seen this before. And I'm like, yeah, well, we're doing it again. This is going to be the fourth time these two teams have met in the playoffs with these two quarterbacks. The Chiefs have won the previous three. Do you think the Bills get over the hump with a win?
Yes, they do say that bad things come in fours for the Buffalo Bills franchise. But I don't think that'll be the case. I'll have the Bills winning this game.
I'm going to take Chiefs.
And when you look at the head-to-head matchups over the last 10 games of these teams, they've just been so crazy close. Regular season and postseason combined, each team is 5-5, and they each have scored 251 points. So 251 points for, 251 points against. Like, that's how crazy close this has been. And even looking back to what the regular season game was this year, I think you're going to see a lot of things that are different. I mean, just look at the list of players that miss from both teams. For the Bills, they're missing Matt Milano, Spencer Brown, Dalton Kincaid, and Keon Coleman. And on the Chiefs side, they did not have Isaiah Pacheco, Marquise Brown, Jalen Watson, Charles Omenihu, or Harrison Butker. So this game could certainly look different. And even think about how the Chiefs really played the Bills in that game. I mean, there were snaps where Drew Tranquil was playing as a safety on third downs. Like, that's not something I think that they're going to be employing again.
No. And yeah, this is where the season really begins for the Chiefs. I mean, in Patrick Mahomes' entire career there, I mean, they've done no worse than losing in this game. But they've shown they have the ability to lose in this game. They lost to the Bengals with Joe Burrow, and then to the Patriots, Tom Brady. So this is definitely a losable game. This is definitely going to be a close one. It should be a thriller. I don't expect it's going to be the high-scoring shootout that we have come to expect from these two teams. Certainly not going to be a 13 seconds type of game. I'm thinking more, 23-20 sort of vibe. But this one is a game where the Bills have to stick to their identity. Like, they can't get antsy. And I've heaped up the praise on Allen. I think he should have won the MVP. He has to continue to be disciplined. This cannot be the game where you break free from what you've been doing and try and go berserk. You have to just stick to your game plan. If you're the Bills, you have to be like, we beat this team already. We know how to beat them. We have to stick to what has worked for us this season, what worked to beat this team in the first time we played them. Because that you can do that again. And the Chiefs, you know that they're going to be just waiting. They're going to be waiting for you to mess up. And when you do, they're going to seize that like a shark. They're going to sniff for that blood in the water. Whether it's a missed field goal from Tyler Bass, who's been a little shaky, or whether it's a fumble or an interception or a big sack, you know they're going to capitalize off anything that you do. So the margin of error is super small. If you're the Bills, do not lose this game. And I think it's the old adage is true. Like, more games are lost in the NFL than they're won. So if you're the Bills, mistake-free football is the key.
Yeah. And when you're looking at the way these teams can win, Buffalo's gone over 100 rushing yards in 9 out of 10 games and over 140 yards 4 times in the last 10. So when you think of Kansas City, is selling out to stop the run, is that what they're going to do? Or are they going to employ a similar game as to what Buffalo did against Baltimore last week, saying, all right, we want to stop their rushing attack, pass on us? Like, I really wonder if that's something they're going to do. And if that's the case, can they bait Allen into throwing the turnovers like you had mentioned? Or can Joe Brady do a better job of scheming up the intermediate passes? Because I think that's something that's been missing from this Bills offense, is really utilizing the middle of the field, especially when they have players like Dalton Kincaid, who is supposed to be this generational tight end, and we've seen almost nothing from him this year. And like even players like Amari Cooper, who seem like they've almost been phased out of the offense. Those are two players that can really go and win for you in the intermediate areas. And I think it's something that's going to be really important and a key for the Bills to be able to win this week, especially if the Chiefs are selling out to try and stop the run.
Yeah, and they have to be able to cover Travis Kelce too. The Chiefs, like that, their offense, especially in the playoffs, it runs through him. I mean, he is the centerpiece of that offense, and they don't have the best weapons in the wide receiving core to go over the top or to beat you in the slot or on the edges. Like, they are playing up the middle with Travis Kelce, and if you cannot defend him, you're going to have a really tough time winning this game. Like, this is the reason why I'm very confident. I think it'll be close, because that's just how the Chiefs play. But I am very confident in the Chiefs. I would be surprised, shocked even, if they lost, because I just think Travis Kelce and Patrick Mahomes, they're as dynamic a duo as any. I mean, they're a better duo than Brady and Gronk were by almost every statistical metric. And Patrick Mahomes and this offense, I've been saying this all year, that they said, oh, they haven't scored over 30 points, but they scored 30, but they haven't scored over 30. I think they've been saving it. I really do. And maybe you roll your eyes and be like, oh, okay, how do you prove that? I don't know. I don't know how I prove it. I just think that this team, when the playoffs come around, there's something that ignites in them. And I still believe with my heart that Patrick Mahomes is the best quarterback in the league this season. Or not, just overall. Maybe not this season. Stats don't play it out. But I think when it comes down to it, he's going to show everyone why we have all said that for so long. And he's going to remind us of who he actually is. So I would be shocked if they lost this game. And I just think the Chiefs, they're destined to go to the Super Bowl and compete for that three-peat.
I'd like to see that for the team. If they're really going to be the best, then prove it, because I feel like they have not this year. And they're a little bit different than they have before. Like I mentioned, the rushing attack has been a lot less. So I think the Bills can really focus on more being able to cover Kelce, being able to stop the deep plays. Like, if they can make sure that Kelce's not going off all the time in the middle of the field, and you're not letting Worthy beat you on a deep route, I think you've got a really easy pass to be able to take this game.
Yeah, I definitely... I mean, I don't know if it's easy. I don't think it's ever easy beating this Chiefs team, especially in Arrowhead. But the Bills, I think they have as good a chance as they've ever had beat the Chiefs in this one. So I think we'll get to the keys in a second here. But I think if they play mistake-free football in all three phases of the game, they have a better than a coin flip chance to win it. But I don't think they're going to be able to do that, unfortunately.
Well, one thing we should mention, I meant to put on the podcast last week to mark my words, and Rob can vouch for me that I did right afterwards. I marked my words that whoever won Baltimore versus Buffalo was going to represent the AFC in the championship 100%. So we decided to put some money on it because we were very disagreeing. So Rob, of course, taking the Chiefs in that, and so now the winner, of course, is Buffalo. So
big money on this.
Yes. Definitely big money on this to the winner of this game.
Yep, definitely big money. I think the winner of this game, and it's kind of the same thread, is the winner of the Super Bowl. I think these are the two best teams in the NFL. The winner of this game wins the Super Bowl. I don't feel confident in either of the NFC teams to beat either of these two AFC teams.
Yeah, they'll certainly be favored. Whoever wins this game will certainly be favored in the Super Bowl.
Yes, definitely. And from there, before we go on to Scott's parlay, we bombarded these teams. We're obviously opposing each other in both these matchups, but we want to give the other teams a chance. So we're going to go with our golden ticket take. So in this, we're going to be analyzing the team that we picked to lose, and we're going to be telling you what their golden ticket to the Super Bowl is. If they can do this thing, then they will punch their golden ticket to the Super Bowl. So Scott, let's start it off with this Bills-Chiefs game. What's the Chiefs' golden ticket to the Super Bowl?
I think the Chiefs' golden ticket is going to be able to get off the field on third downs. Getting the Bills in the third and longs and really getting off the field on third downs. The Chiefs are 29th in the NFL this year in third down percentage. The Bills were at nearly 50% last week. They went 5-11 versus the Ravens, and they were at 60%, 9 of 15, the last time these two teams played. So I think getting off the field on third down is going to be absolutely massive for this Chiefs team to be able to try and control the game, get the script that they want, and be able to advance to the Super Bowl.
All right, and for me, for the Bills to punch their golden ticket to the Super Bowl, I think they have to not lose points on special teams. So for me, this includes missing or getting your field goal blocked, getting your extra points blocked, or your punts blocked, or allowing a punt or kickoff return touchdown. The Chiefs, they've won like 3 games this season off special teams. They had that blocked field goal against the Broncos. They had that game last week against the Texans, but I think special teams were the winner for them there. And then in the Raiders game, when the Raiders, they were a field goal from winning that, they fumbled. So that to me is an error that where you're losing points. Like, you were in field goal range. Just don't do something stupid and you kick a field goal in that game. The Bills have to play disciplined. Like I said before, they have to be a disciplined team, but they can't be giving away points on special teams. So this also includes if past the 30-yard line and it's 4th down, this is a game where every point is going to matter. It's not going to be a high-scoring game. So normally, yes, I like aggressiveness on 4th down. You got to take points. You cannot lose points. So if the Bills do not lose points on special teams from making one of those errors, I think that is how they punch their golden ticket to the Super Bowl. And over on the next side of things, the Commanders and Eagles, I picked the Commanders, very confident in them. You picked the Eagles, confident in them. What do you think the Commanders' golden ticket to the Super Bowl is?
I think the Commanders' golden ticket is going to be staying solid in the trenches on their offensive line. With Sam Cosmi going out, the guard position is a big question mark going into this week. And Dan Quinn already said himself he's not even sure who they're going to start there yet. And you're facing Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis on the interior of their offensive line. And we talked about back in that recap against the Rams, Jalen Carter getting through, getting the sack, and really helping to end that game versus the Rams, really limiting those big play offensive linemen, especially on the interior, is going to be huge for that team. If they're able to keep Daniels clean as much as they can and just stop Carter from wrecking havoc in there, I think that is going to be their golden ticket to win.
All right, and for me, the Eagles' golden ticket to the Super Bowl is pretty simple. I'm putting a hard line here at 30 yards. So the Eagles, they can win if they lose less than 30 yards off of sacks and negative run plays, but specifically sacks. I mean, this team, they lost over 60 yards last week, and they've lost the most yards to sacks out of these teams in the playoffs. They average only 93. They've averaged only 93 total passing yards in these playoffs when you take into account of minusing the sacks from that. So if they play smart football, I know I keep saying this, smart football, that's the key to the playoffs. You cannot be taking these big negative sacks against the Commanders team whose offense is pretty dang lethal and has been very, very clutch. So Jalen Hurts got to be disciplined, less than 30 yards off of sacks, negative plays, and that's the Eagles' golden ticket to the Super Bowl.
All right.
And from there, we're going on to Scott's parlay. This is the second to last parlay of the season. Got to make it some good picks here for the big money. What do you got for Conference Championship weekend?
So last week we were able to hit on our parlay, so we were hoping to take that momentum into the final weeks of the season and get a couple more wins. So we're going to start things off by taking the Buffalo Bills. We're going to take them on the money line. It's almost a straight pick'em game, plus 104 for the Bills. I am confident in this team. I think they're going to get it done, so I'll be taking Buffalo. And on the other side, I'm going to be taking the Eagles. Right now, they are fairly big favorites, plus 290, the exact same number I got them at last week. But I'm also going to be taking the Commanders at plus 6.5. I think that game's going to be closer than that. I'd mentioned it before. I think that is too big a line. So I think the Eagles are going to win straight up, but Commanders will cover. So this week, bet on the money line, Buffalo Bills, Philadelphia Eagles, and Washington Commanders on the spread.
All right, yes, there. Yeah, one thing we did forget to mention there is our against the spread pick. Scott's taking the Bills plus 1.5. I'm taking the Chiefs minus 1.5. Yet more at stake in this matchup. It all comes down to this. It all comes down to this for these four teams. This is the moment they've been waiting for. The Bills, will they finally get over the hump? The Chiefs, can they go and compete for their third straight Super Bowl? Can Jaden Daniels make history as the first rookie QB to be in the Super Bowl? And can the Eagles overcome their laughingstock coach and turnover-prone QB? Okay, that was kind of unfair. Can the Eagles power through Saquon Barkley and make a historic one for the Super Bowl? All these questions will be answered on Sunday when the conference championships are done. And we are looking forward to that moment. We're looking forward to both these games. And we hope you greatly enjoyed the NFL season this far. And we thank you so much for listening to the podcast. Your viewership is greatly appreciated. Feel free to like, follow, subscribe. We are on any platform you get your podcasts. And this has been Mark My Words Football Podcast with Rob.
Thanks, guys.
And we are tuning